Mainstream fake media is dying. We live in an age of information overload. We are bombarded with one-sided news 24/7. But how much of it is actually informing us? Mainstream media, often controlled by governments and corporate interests, if not by those who own the media, shape our understanding of the world. It presents a carefully curated version of reality, one that serves the powerful and maintains the status quo. This illusion of information keeps us passive and unquestioning. We are led to believe we are well informed, while crucial truths remain hidden in plain sight. This manipulation and division are not accidental. It is a deliberate strategy to mold public opinion. And David and Monoplote, by controlling the narrative, those in power control the perception of events. They dictate who the heroes and villains are, they define what is acceptable and what is not, and in doing so they shape our understanding of the world and our place in it. This is not a conspiracy theory, but a demonstrable reality. We need to wake up. Look at the coverage of any major conflict or social issue. You will find a consistent pattern of bias, omission, and distortion. The voices of the marginalized are silenced, while the powerful are given a platform to justify their actions. We are fed a diet of propaganda disguised as news, and we are encouraged to consume it uncritically. The consequences of this manipulation are profound. Just look where we are in today's world. It creates division, fuels conflict, and perpetuates injustice. It prevents us from seeing the world clearly and understanding the root causes of suffering, and it robs us of our agency, our ability to think critically and challenge the status quo. Breaking free from this illusion of information is essential if we are to create a more just and equitable world. The world is a complex place full of nuance and ambiguity, but mainstream media thrives on simplicity. It reduces complex issues to black and white, good versus evil narratives. This oversimplification serves a purpose. It makes it easier to control the narrative and demonize those who challenge it. Conflicts are rarely as straightforward as they are portrayed. There are often historical grievances, power imbalances, and competing interests at play. But the media rarely delves into these complexities. Instead, it offers up simplistic explanations that fit predetermined agendas. This not only distorts our understanding of the world, but it also fuels division and conflict. Dissent, a cornerstone of any democracy, is often vilified by mainstream outlets. Those who dare to question the official narrative are labeled as radicals, extremists, or even traitors. Their voices are silenced, their motives are questioned, and their characters are assassinated. This creates a climate of fear and self-censorship, where people are afraid to speak out against injustice for fear of being ostracized or worse. The oversimplification of complex issues and the vilification of dissent are two sides of the same coin. They are both tactics used to control the narrative and maintain the status quo. By refusing to engage with complexity and by silencing dissenting voices, mainstream media creates a distorted and dangerous view of the world. It is a view that serves the powerful, fuels division, and prevents meaningful change. We are drowning in a sea of suffering. Every day we are bombarded with images and stories of war, poverty, and injustice. And yet, we have become desensitized to it. The constant exposure to suffering has created a numbness epidemic. This numbness is not a natural human condition. It is a learned response to an overwhelming reality. We are conditioned to accept suffering as an inevitable part of life. We are taught to look away from the pain of others, to distance ourselves from their struggles, and in doing so, we become complicit in their suffering. This desensitization is a dangerous phenomenon. It allows us to ignore the plight of the oppressed. It makes us indifferent to injustice, and it prevents us from taking action to create a better world. When we lose our capacity for empathy, we lose a fundamental part of our humanity. We must resist this numbing effect. We must refuse to accept suffering as normal. We must challenge the systems that perpetuate it. And most importantly, we must never lose sight of the human cost of injustice. Every statistic, every headline, every image of suffering represents a real person with a real story. We owe it to them to see their humanity, to feel their pain, and to fight for a world where their suffering is no longer ignored. Resistance to oppression is a fundamental human right. It is the lifeblood of any just and equitable society. Yet mainstream media often portrays resistance as irrational, dangerous, and even evil. This distortion serves to delegitimize legitimate struggles for justice and to maintain the status quo. When people are denied basic rights and freedoms, when their voices are silenced, and when their suffering is ignored, they have a right to resist. This resistance can take many forms, from peaceful protests to armed struggle. But regardless of the form it takes, resistance is often met with violence and repression by those in power. Mainstream media often plays a key role in justifying this repression. It portrays protesters as violent agitators, as threats to public order, as enemies of the state. It ignores the root causes of their anger and frustration, and it demonizes their leaders, often painting them as dangerous radicals or terrorists. This distorted portrayal of resistance has real-world consequences. It creates a climate of fear and suspicion around those who dare to challenge the status quo. It justifies the use of violence and repression against peaceful protesters, and it makes it more difficult for people to come together and fight for a more just and equitable world. We must remember that resistance is not the problem. It is the symptom of a problem. And until we address the root causes of injustice, resistance and being vigilant will continue to be necessary. Shasha 2024.